From the open season studio, I want to thank you for joining us here on SuperTalk Outdoors, where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi. Listen, you can listen to this show on the SuperTalk Outdoors on supertalk.fm, Amazon Alexa, the SuperTalk Mississippi app, or of course you can listen on your local SuperTalk Mississippi channel across the state of Mississippi. What a smart strategy they have to be in all these key regions of the state so that people can have access to us. You can also watch the show on SuperTalk TV at Ceasefire TV. But some of you might be watching on social media. You can watch the show on YouTube or Facebook, or see our post on X, formerly Twitter. Or you can listen on your favorite podcast. We try to be there whenever, however people want to engage with us, and the numbers are significant when you add it all up, the number of people who are engaged in this show. So we really appreciate you being with us today. It is May the 6th, 2024. So the legislature sunny died on Saturday morning. What that means is they have ended their session. Paul Gallo from the Gallo Show posted this morning, "Oh, the House and Senate do not gavel in today. Everyone has voted. Everyone has voted. The machine is closed and will remain closed, Madam Clerk." Well, what that means is essentially something that I posted on Twitter and then again at the SuperTalk Facebook page is this. This means hunting violator Leonard Bentz's noise and special interest-driven time on the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks Commission is officially over. The Senate did not consider a confirmation of Bentz. Let's hope Governor Reeves appoints a smart, selfless commissioner focused on Mississippi's wildlife legacy. Man, I tell you, I'm eager to turn this chapter. And I would say, as I said to many people who have contacted me, just onward and upward. It's time for this commission has some very serious issues that they face, and it's time for some serious people, selfless leaders. And, I'm excited about the future on the commission as we go forward. So look forward to watching the governor as he appoints the next commissioner. And then Bill Coster's term is up in July, and we'll have another commissioner. So, I think things are looking up for the commission as of this morning. A couple of other things from the legislative session. The Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund that we talked about on the show many, many times got $12,000. We hoped for 20. It's a really it's a very challenging session for a lot of reasons. We've watched as they've wrestled with the PERS effort and, of course, education funding and the economic development projects that have been part of the state going forward. Of course, the Medicaid expansion debate. There's a lot to take their attention. I think you have to be pleased that $12 million came out of it. But, the reality is we need dedicated funding. The House, once again, passed a bill for dedicated funding, and the Senate did not consider that. So I had been told by the Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, if we get a couple of years under our belt, we can come back and take a look at that. So we'll have more conversations as we go forward about how to get dedicated funding for this incredible program that the matching funds we hope to get is exactly what's happening, and the kind of projects that they're funding across the state are going to really help us and increase our outdoor enjoyment in the state. Another issue, this is one of the reasons why we've got to pay closer attention to what happens in the legislature. The wild turkey stamp bill that was almost across the finish line died. The language from the House and the Senate was identical. So I've got a lot of questions about this. Were the two chairmen not aligned? What was going on? Were we communicating the way we needed to? How can a bill that so many people worked so hard on, the wild turkey stamp bill, gets almost to the finish line and die when the language from the House and the Senate were identical? I don't understand it. Well, we're going to understand more about why that happened. In coming shows, we'll focus on it, but we really need to we need to do a debriefing on that one. How can such an important bill die like that? Here's another one, and look, this is a big one actually. There was a trespassing bill that came before one of the judiciary committees. This was not a wildlife bill; it was in a judiciary committee, and essentially it was a good trespassing bill. But someone added during the conference committee, this very specific language that said that if someone were to trespass on your property and kill an animal, that you would have to pay the restitution to the landowner. Somebody slipped that language in during the conference committee. The Wildlife Committee never saw this. It was never referred to Wildlife Committee. It's one of those last-minute things that's done in the fog of a legislative session. But this is a violation of the public trust. The landowner doesn't own that animal. The public owns that animal. So I think there's going to be some issues around constitutionality of this bill. I would really highly recommend the governor and his staff reach out to the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks and their lawyers and get their read on it. I've got a lot of comments from wildlife leaders across the state. One asked me this. I question the constitutionality of this. Can a private person be compensated for something in the public trust? If the proceeds had gone to the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, I think it would have been fine. But it didn't. It went to the landowner as if the landowner owned that animal. Mississippi, there's another comment. Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks should be receiving restitution for wildlife taken through trespassing, not the landowner. Wildlife belonged to the people of Mississippi. Someone else sent a note, migratory birds would not be subject to this bill since they're federal species. Another one sent this. I was told just now by a smart attorney that this is the single worst bill passed by the legislature. It started only involving farm pond trespassing, which I get, but now involves deer and turkey. Why compensate the property owner for something they don't own? And then, and there are others, but look, there's clearly an issue with this around the constitutionality. It has to do with the public trust, and I would highly recommend the governor and his staff reach out to Lynn Posey and his lawyers, reach out to people like James Cummings at Wildlife Mississippi, and look at the constitutionality of this bill. It really has a lot of problems attached to it. And I think, again, this is the single worst bill passed by the legislature. That's what happens when you slip language in at the last minute. That is for sure. Okay, one of the point, as you can hear from what I'm sharing today, that this is one of the reasons why we got to pay closer attention to wildlife legislation in our legislature. We tend not, especially during a busy session, we tend not to pay as close attention as we should, and we've really got to fix that. And the show will continue to focus on those things, but we're not going to be able to do it alone. We need many voices involved in these conversations. And I look forward to continue to bring focus to it and explaining to you why all of us have to pay closer attention as we go forward. Okay, now let's shift gears. I have really been looking forward to my next guest. We're going to be spending the rest of the show with her. She is the Forest Supervisor, Forest Service, National Forest in Mississippi. And her name is Shannon Kelardy. You've heard me mention her name many times. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Shannon, and I want to welcome her to Super Talk Outdoors. Shannon, how are you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me on.
It's good. Where are you sitting right now?
I am in my office here in Jackson.
So, look, Shannon, we're going to talk a lot about what you do as the forest supervisor and the over 1 million acres that you have responsibility for. Huge role in this state, and your leadership is really, really appreciated. We'll talk about all of that. But if in a nutshell, if you were riding on an elevator with someone and they said, Shannon, what do you do? What's your answer to them?
I am ultimately responsible for the management of just shy of 1.2 million acres of National Forest System land here in Mississippi. And that includes about 200 employees, roughly. We have around 600 miles of fishable streams, over several hundred miles of non-motorized hiking, biking, and horseback trails. We have developed recreation areas as well as dispersed camping areas. Canoeing, we have about 2 million visitors to the National Forest each year. But in addition, we also manage the habitat for all of the wildlife here in Mississippi, not all the wildlife here on that National Forest in Mississippi. And we do a lot of that through what we call being a working forest, which is timber sales and our prescribed fire program. We burn here in Mississippi more than just about anywhere else in the country, averaging around 200,000 acres a year, and we move about 180,000 CCF of timber a year.
Wow. I mean, it's incredible. when we think about the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks and the wildlife management areas, what our forefathers did to set so much land aside for public use, we should also always include the the U.S. Forest Service in that conversation, because when you add it all up, most of us are 10 minutes away from being able to put our feet down on some public land somewhere. And the relationship between your department and the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks is really important. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Shannon Kelardy and learn more about what she's up to these days. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors from the Open Season Properties studio. Hey, listen, Open Season Properties is a full-service real estate company with a team approach philosophy that ensures your needs are the highest priority, whether it's rural land sales, residential, or commercial properties. Open Season Property markets and sells real estate in Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. And they're dedicated to the development of long-term client relationships and unwavering commitment to service. Go to openseasonproperties.com to learn more. Hey, listen, we're visiting with U.S. Forest Service Supervisor Shannon Kelardy, someone I've been really looking forward to introducing to this audience. Shannon is an incredible leader in the state, and her partnership with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks is important, really important. And so we'll talk more about that as we go forward. But when we went to break, we were just giving you kind of a high-level view of what she's up to, just shy of 1.2 million acres in Mississippi, incredible amount of land that they had to say grace over. And they take the management of that property really seriously. Like controlled burns, for example, we'll talk about kind of maybe record-setting in the United States, what they do there. But before we go any further, let's take a step back for a minute, Shannon. I saw Cuz Strickland, my friend Cuz Strickland, who's been on this show many times, posted one of his posts that said, showing that you actually killed a turkey. So
Yes,
tell me about that.
Yes, sir. So since my family and I moved to Mississippi about 5 years ago, we've taken up hunting. And I've had the fortune to meet Mr. Cuz Strickland through a mutual friend who invited me to go hunting with him. I've been turkey hunting a few times with other friends. I've taken my boys hunting on National Forest System land here. I've talked to several, but I've never actually seen one until I got to go with Mr. Strickland. And it was the most fun I think I've had in a really long time. Mr. Strickland took me out and he said, okay, I think I know where they're roosting. We're going to get set up really early. We got to be here exactly at 5 o'clock. So I got there and he administered the turkey oath to me before we went out in the woods. It was so much fun. And we got set up and we barely sat down and they started gobbling. He didn't even have to call. But we sat there for, I don't know, probably about 2 or 3 hours and we never saw one. They were gobbling just left and right. I think we heard about 4 or 5 gobblers. And at one point it was so much fun because Mr. Strickland got into an argument with a hen, which I'd never heard that before, but that was a lot of fun. And then Mr. Strickland said several times, he's like, if somebody would pay me $1 million to sit here till 4, we'd get a turkey. I about guarantee it. And he's like, we can't sit here all day. So we got up around about 9:30 or so. Went, got lunch, ran around town a little bit, and then went back out to the same spot. Got out there about 2 o'clock. This time another friend had come back out with us. So it was me, Mr. Strickland, and someone else. And they were both experienced turkey hunters, and they put me in the middle. I was the shooter. And we're just sitting there, nothing, not a peep. Mr. Strickland called a few times, not a sound. And eventually I heard something moving and I signaled to the other two. I said, and they both were like, oh, one of them said he heard it, the other one didn't. So we put on all of our masks and gloves and everything, got ready. And then I'm looking and mind you, I've never seen a live turkey in the woods. So I saw just a little peep of white come up and back down. I said, did y'all see that? Both of them said no. And then I saw it again, and this time I saw white and a little bit of red. And I probably shouldn't admit this because you have a large audience, but they both said they couldn't see it, but I could. And I was like, well, maybe I'm seeing a chicken. Maybe that's why they can't see it. They think that I'm looking at a chicken, and they're like, that's not a turkey, it's a chicken. Well, then all of a sudden the turkey came out into full view. And then they both saw it. And this was the funniest thing. I wish I had audio of this, but they both, don't get your gun up, freeze. Get your gun up, don't move. Get your gun up, freeze. Get your gun up, shoot, fire, kill it. It was a great experience. And I shot it as about a 20-yard shot and dropped it with one shell.
Well, Cuz is, first of all, he's kind of an icon in Mississippi, but he's known all over the United States for his work with Mossy Oak. Been on TV for so many years. But what I love about Cuz when I spend time with him is that he has a youthful exuberance still.
Yes,
And a friend of mine, his name is Reed Geis, who's been on the show a couple of times. Reed says, what people say of Reed is that he has a low threshold for amazement. Okay, I love people who have a low threshold for amazement. In other words, they never get tired of being amazed about something, being out in nature and seeing it for what it is and being excited about that. And Cuz has that. Cuz has this, every time's like another great time. And boy, you add to that the opportunity to take someone like you and let you experience that for the first time. And then you understand why Will Primo says that when he's turkey hunting, he doesn't necessarily feel like he has to pray because he believes he's in a prayer while he's doing it. You know, being one with nature. But it is an amazing experience, isn't it?
It is. And I tell you, being with Mr. Strickland and getting my first bird was just absolutely amazing. I could sit and listen to his stories all day. Genuinely good man. And you're right about being in a prayer, just observing nature all around you and being respectful of it was a great experience.
Well, I'm so happy for you to have had that experience and to be able to say for the rest of your life that you killed your first turkey with Cuz Strickland. That's some bona fides right there for sure for you. And so, first of all, congratulations on having a great experience. But listen, my son, when he was in law school, he was hunting public land, and he'd have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get there. And he pursued one turkey for probably a week or two. He never got it, but he said it was the best turkey hunts that he's ever been on, up and down ridges and all around and back and forth and all these close calls that it never came together. But it's, at the end of the day, you really understand it's not about pulling that trigger, really. It's all those other experiences, being able to drive around town with Cuz and tell stories. And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
It is. And I have 2 young sons, and I've gotten them into it as well. And I've taken them out a few times to the National Forest here. And bringing my boys out to turkey hunt is always an exercise in patience. But teaching them to be quiet and still and observe, and looking for the tracks and listening to everything. We did successfully get one to gobble at us on National Forest land. Other than that, the closest we've come is a cow. We did talk to a cow for quite some time, but it's been a lot of fun.
Well, Shannon, how old are your boys?
10 and 6.
Well, those are great ages, incidentally. And, I say that a family that spends the time in the outdoors together stays together. My daughter doesn't hunt, but she loves to fish. And my 2 sons love to hunt, and obviously they love to fish. But if I were to talk about what's the single biggest characteristic of our family outside of the love we have for one another, it's the time that we spend in the outdoors together on the water and all that. And they learn a lot about life. Your sons are learning about life. The discipline that's needed just to achieve life success are the same kinds of disciplines that are necessary when you're in the woods. And it's a great opportunity to share that with them, isn't it?
It is. And I think it's the quietest that I'm ever able to get them to be. The quietest and the stillest, because at home, that magic doesn't exist. They're just wide open constantly. But when we're in the woods, when we're deer hunting or turkey hunting, they do really well to stay still and stay quiet.
Yeah. Listen, speaking of family, your dad's kind of famous in a way. He once did some work on Air Force One. Tell me about your family. Where did you grow up, and tell me more about your parents?
So I, in a way, followed both of my parents in my various professional careers here. So my dad was in the Marine Corps and in the Air Force. And because of that, we kind of lived several places in my childhood. But he started in the Marine Corps, and he's always worked in avionics. When he was in the Marine Corps, he worked on the radio systems in C-130s. And, he's told me this story so many times, I should be ashamed for forgetting, but the particular radios that he was working on in the Marine Corps, they did away with them. So he switched over to the Air Force. My dad is one of these people who's just ridiculously smart. And he started working in the Air Force, and I don't know how exactly it came to be, but eventually he got a job working on Air Force One out of Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. And what he did there was he worked on all of the cryptology equipment that went on to Air Force One. And then whenever that equipment was being used, him or a member of his team was responsible for being in a secure facility to monitor the messaging to make sure the equipment was functional at all times when it was in use.
Yeah, well, that's so interesting. So interesting to be able to say you have a father that was trusted with working around or on Air Force One. That's a heck of a story. Listen, when we come back on the other side, we're going to continue our conversation with Shannon Kelardy. She's a forest supervisor here in Mississippi with just under 1.2 million acres of responsibility. Boy, the public land we have access to in Mississippi is incredible. We'll come back after this break. We'll talk more about what is it that the U.S. Forest Service does in Mississippi, and we'll give you a sense of all that. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors from the Open Season Property Studio. Are you looking to purchase that perfect piece of hunting property, upgrade your farm equipment, or have you been just dreaming of owning the slice of heaven out in the country? Look no further than Mississippi Land Bank for your financing needs. For more than 100 years, farming families and landowners in North Mississippi have turned to Mississippi Land Bank for all kinds of financial solutions, whether it's for land, equipment, or livestock. For more information, visit mslandbank.com or go by and see one of their friendly staff at any of their offices. Mississippi Land Bank. Hey, listen, we're visiting with Shannon Kelardy. She's a U.S. Forest Service manager, supervisor here in Mississippi, and enjoying getting to know her better. I really enjoyed hearing about her turkey hunt with Cuz Strickland. He'll enjoy the way you talked about it, and the fact that you're already working with your sons out on U.S. forest land. I think that's so cool, and you'll make a lot of memories doing that, Shannon, as you go forward. I know you know that. So listen, when you look at what you have to say grace over, I'm looking at all the various segments of land that you guys have to say grace over. The national forests in Mississippi, man, do they play a big role, don't they?
Yes, sir.
So when you look at designated recreational areas, you got 14 wildlife management areas that when people think of wildlife management areas, tend to think of the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks wildlife management areas, but you have your own. What just for people so they can have a sense of where they are? Why don't you kind of run through the names for them real quick?
Well, Mr. Matthews, I don't think I could tell you all 14 by name off the top of my head. But one thing I do want to mention about the wildlife management areas, or the WMAs as we call them, is that there's 14 on the National Forest System, but all of those are managed in collaboration and in partnership with the department.
Okay.
And what that means is that we own the land, but we work with the department to manage the wildlife openings and make those areas really spectacular habitat for the various species.
So when you think about the boundaries, people who go out there and hunt a bunch, they're used to seeing those yellow signs.
Mm-hmm.
And I have friends of mine who own, well, I have several friends who own land that's adjacent to U.S. Forest Service land. But I actually have the list in front of me, so I'll run through the list real quick. Bienville, Caney Creek, Caston Creek, Chickasaw, Chickasahey, Choctaw, Leaf River, Little Biloxi, Mason Creek, Red Creek, Sandy Creek, Sunflower, Tallahalla, and Upper Sardis. You think about what you guys do, man. White-tailed deer, white turkey, quail, squirrel, rabbit, raccoon, and waterfowl can be found on these areas. And man, when you're talking about you're serious about how you manage the habitat, you have a serious plan around habitat management, don't you?
Yes, sir, we do. We have an entire forest plan that documents exactly how we're going to manage the national forest. And in addition, we tier to what the department does to manage the species across Mississippi as well. So it truly is a partnership between the National Forest and the department.
Well, I think, there are times, listen, I live in Biloxi, so we'll look north during the months that you guys are doing controlled burn, and we'll see this, huge plume of smoke. And people will wonder, is there a forest fire? Well, actually there is, but it's a planned burn. But those are significant burns, and you're doing that. We talk a lot on this show that private landowners, probably the most important thing they could do for wildlife habitat enhancement is control burns.
Right.
You guys have really embraced that in a very serious way. And why is Mississippi so on board with this, where some states are not as far along as you would think they would be? We've really kind of leading the way there, aren't we?
We are. And I mean, there's so many factors that go into it. One of the things primarily being that in Mississippi, we're blessed with a public who understands and embraces the role of natural prescribed fire's role in the ecosystem. Actually, a lot of times on-planned fires that we receive are turkey hunters who know that they need to set a little controlled burn that might get out of hand, and then our folks have to go out and help put it out. But a lot of the hunters understand exactly the role that the fire does in cleaning out the underbrush, renewing the soils so that those animals can come back and they have their natural food sources. They like running around where there's not as thick of an underbrush, makes the trees healthier. So that's one of the things that we have is just the public embracing and understanding the role that fire plays in keeping our ecosystems healthy. Another one is that the ecosystems, the habitats here are already conducive to it. A lot of our pine ecosystems are on about what we call a 3 to 5 year rotation for needing to be burned. So if we get out of a cycle with a burn, then we're looking at needing to do a more serious burn. So we do really try to maintain that schedule. And it depends on where it is, but about every 3 to 5 years. We've really embraced technology here in Mississippi. We're leading the country in the use of the drone to ignite prescribed fires, which is making it more efficient. It's putting less smoke in the air. And one of the biggest things is getting our people out of helicopters, because in Mississippi, we burn very large blocks at a time. A lot of times over 1,000 acres at once. And that puts a lot of pressure on the use of a helicopter. And using a helicopter requires a human in the air, and that's dangerous. So anytime that we can improve safety for the folks who implement our prescribed fire program by using a drone, we're going to do it. So we're about 70,000 acres that we've accomplished right now in Mississippi with the drone, which is more than anywhere else in the country.
Wow, that's incredible. Someone sent me a note when we talked about controlled burns with Jordan Blissett, who was on the show recently, said, what happens to the wildlife when you're doing a controlled burn? And the answer is they're very resilient. But how do you answer that question?
I had the same question when I was an intern working for the Forest Service. We're getting ready to do a burn and we're setting up and we're putting out all these signs to make sure the public knows. And I turned to somebody and said, I have a weird question, but what about the animals? And they said, well, one, when we're out here fooling around getting set up, most of the time the animals are going to run away when they hear such a large human presence in the first place. Second, the way that we do our burns, we don't typically just circle an area all at once and light it on fire. We do what's called a backing fire, and we light one area at a time, which gives animals and wildlife the opportunity to escape to the one side or the other of the fire. It's not like we're circling them in and lighting it all on fire at once. They have more than enough opportunity to escape.
What's interesting, once a controlled burn is over, the natural reseeding that takes place almost immediately, within a matter of a week or two, you begin to see the forest coming back to life again. And that creates incredible browse for animals. I mean, there's so much good that comes from it, isn't there?
There is. I mean, you can burn an acre anywhere in Mississippi, and within a month, it barely looks like it's been burned. Within 6 months, you're looking at all sorts of new regrowth.
That's the cool thing about it, for sure. Listen, when we think about the U.S. Forest land, you tend to think about hunting, And as it relates to that, we'll come back in just a second and talk about all the hiking and camping and picnicking and the opportunities to enjoy some of the water features as well. But one of the things that you really place as a high priority, that's why you are in sync at commission meetings. You put a high priority to working closely with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks and that team. There's a real symbiotic relationship between the Forest Service and the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Talk to me about that.
So I have been the forest supervisor here for coming up on 3 years, and Mr. Posey's been in his place as director for about the same amount of time. So it's been great that he and I have been able to get used to our roles together. And he has created a very open and welcoming atmosphere over there at the department, and we've been doing some really cool stuff together. I'm excited that coming up here in June, we're going to be having a joint leadership meeting of sorts where all the different WMA managers are going to be meeting with my leadership team, which I don't think has ever happened before. And we're just going to be talking about, hey, what do you do? And here's what I do. And how do we communicate on what we need to be doing together? And how do we make it more efficient? How do we improve, not only for the sake of the habitat, the wildlife, but also the publics that we serve? Because ultimately, we're doing this for the public, both the department and the National Forest. This is public land, public resources, and we want to make it the most enjoyable we can. So bridging that gap together has been absolutely wonderful. The National Public Lands Day just a few months ago in the springtime, or excuse me, last summer, down there on the Leaf River WMA, the department came out there and helped us clean that up. And then last summer in June, the department came out and helped us clean up the Delta National Forest, which is also known as the Sunflower WMA. And we also partner together quite a bit for the Natural Science Museum.
It's good stuff. We'll actually continue this conversation with U.S. Forest Service Supervisor Shannon Kelardy. Really pleased to have her on the show today. When we come back after this break, we'll continue our conversation. Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors from the Open Season Properties. No matter what kind of hunting you're into, whether you're looking for 40 acres or 4,000 acres, if you're looking to buy land, you need someone you can trust. He's the hunting land hunter. Call Lake Pickle from Open Season Properties. Call 601-750-2487. 601-750-2487. Lake Pickle. And by the way, he's a terrific conservation leader in this state as well. Just thrilled to be associated with Open Season Properties in Lake Pickle. Okay, let's get back to our conversation with Shannon Kelardy, Supervisor for U.S. Forest Service here in Mississippi. So, Shannon, just real quick, just a comment. You talked about your relationship with Lynn Posey, the Executive Director of the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And someone sent me a note and asked me, how is my relationship with Lynn Posey in light of the fact that this show's focused on some commission issues over the last year or so? And I'll tell you, this is my read. Anytime that I've needed anything from the department, from Lynn Posey or any of the folks that work with him, they have been incredibly responsive. And I have, it's interesting that through some maybe rough waters at times, my issues were never really with the department or with Lynn Posey. The reality is, if you're a regular listener to the show, you know this, but I've celebrated the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks for the entire over 2 years that I've done this show. And that, as it relates to Lynn Posey, he's been incredibly responsive to me. But I was really thrilled to hear how you talked about it. The fact that you guys came in, you Shannon Kelardy and Lynn Posey came into your jobs at about the same time. So it gave you a chance to kind of build a relationship and work together in ways that are going to be really important to Mississippi. And so it's great to see that y'all have that kind of a relationship. So it's not just about hunting, though. You guys you're involved. I mean, obviously, you're U.S. Forest Service, so you're involved in timber management, and there are all kinds of other things that the general public can do to enjoy themselves when you're on your land. How do you manage timber harvest in the just under 1.2 million acres you're responsible for?
So there are a lot of terms of art when it comes to timber management. I'm going to do my very best to not use too many of them. One of the nuances in the Forest Service is we are apparently the only people who still use CCF as a measurement for timber. Everybody else uses tons. But here for the National Forest in Mississippi, we aim to sell roughly around 180,000 tons of CCF, which equates to about 63,000 tons of timber per year. And our forest plan lays out for us a measurement that tells us how much timber we can cut based on how much can be regenerated, because we don't want to clear cut the forest all at once. Obviously, we've learned our lessons about that from centuries ago, Dust Bowl, etc. So we want to make sure that we're cutting on pace with what we can regenerate. A lot of our timber program is focused on restoring longleaf and shortleaf pine where it's native here in Mississippi. Several decades ago, we saw a lot of longleaf disappear off the landscape because it's such a good timber product, but we didn't do a very good job at restoring it at the rate of which we were cutting it. So that's a big focus of our timber program. A lot of folks also have the misperception that our timber program is focused solely on generating revenue, which that is a portion of it. However, the larger focus of our timber program is on creating a resilient and healthy ecosystem, which is relying on the timber program and our prescribed fire program. A lot of the areas on the National Forest have become overstocked plantation pines, which is primarily loblolly or slash pine. And then that's really susceptible to invasive species, southern pine beetle, its beetle, drought. When we get wildfires really tear through a plantation pine awful fast. Whereas if we get a more open, mosaic, 60 to 80 basal area, the trees grow up bigger and stronger, and they're a lot more resilient to various attacks, whether bugs, hurricanes, wildfire, and the habitat. The wildlife prefer a much more open spacing between the trees as well. Trees are just like humans in the sense of they compete for resources. And when they get too jumped up or jumbled up together, they compete for water, air, etc. And then they become unhealthy.
Well, that's interesting, and you put a lot of thought into how diversified you want that mix of trees to be, and how you want to plant them, and all. That's pretty interesting stuff. Listen, and to go along with hunting, as I mentioned, fishing and hiking, camping, picnicking, the opportunities are really limitless for people who enjoy the outdoors. And the good news is people are taking advantage of this, aren't they?
Yes, they are. We have a little over 2 million people visit the National Forest each year.
That's so interesting. Like during hunting season, how do you manage conflict? Because I'm sure people, adjacent landowners, over time almost treat some of this land like they own it, and there can be conflict there. Actually, I'll tell you what we'll do. We're going to come back together again, and we'll talk specifically about. So there's so many more questions about how you do what you do. But one thing is for sure, we're lucky to have you here in this state. I'm thrilled that we finally had an opportunity to visit here on SuperTalk Outdoors, and it's been a pleasure, Shannon, to spend some time with you.
Absolutely, thank you.
This has been Shannon Kelardy, the Forest Supervisor for the U.S. Forest Service here in Mississippi. Listen, have a great day, and as I always end every show, stay safe when you're in the outdoors. Always put safety first. God bless you, and we will see you next week.